All right, I guess we'll go ahead and call the meeting to order at 7:01 on January 7th, 2020. We'll do a quick roll call. Andy Yale.
Yep.
Nate Stacy.
Present.
Brandon Adelman, not here. Cliff Krolik, not here. And we do have a new board member. She is, so Thelma Lavoie is not here. So we have a quorum. We can go ahead tonight. All right, let's start with reviewing the minutes.
One minor clarification on Saturday, November 30th. Halfway down the page, it states, Mr. Lovato states he'll be trucking the bottles from the drop-off shed to the storage area and stuff. He uses the same word again later. You're not gonna truck them, right? Didn't you say you're gonna walk them?
Well, walk up to the store.
Yeah, it might make a little bit of difference in terms of
Yeah.
of usage.
Sit halfway in. So, let's see, we've got the November 19th meeting minutes. Make a motion to accept those as they are. All those in favor?
I was absent, so.
Oh, you were the 19th, correct, so there's only two of us. All right, so we're good for the 20th. So I make a motion to accept the minutes from the 20th.
First change is it's Wednesday, November 20th, so
yes.
I want to make sure that we have that clarified. Hey guys. On page 2, there was a statement by myself. It says, suggest having a home occupation along with an auto garage business may be considered as two uses. I just want to clarify, I guess, because home occupation is different than occupying it as a residential home, so I guess that I want to clarify. I don't know exactly, I guess, what I want.
What is it, occupancy?
Yeah, just because it's not two different businesses, like a home occupation and a business, a garage business seems to me like maybe two separate businesses where one is a residential occupation and one is occupying a residential home versus occupation. Other than that, that's all right there. So I move, I guess, or you move to accept those with those.
Sure, I make a motion to accept the meetings, the minutes from the 20th as complete.
With those
Can you
changes.
second that?
Second?
All those in favor? Okay, so the 30th sidewalk minutes. sidewalk minutes for Maple. I'll give you a couple minutes to read them, Brendan, I know you were there. And I think that was it, Brendan. Chance to go over it. All right, so as far as the minutes from the site walk, Saturday, November 30th at the 478 Maplewood Road, I make a motion to accept those minutes as complete. All those in favor? All right, minutes accepted. The last one would be the box shop. So for the minutes for Saturday, November 30th at the site walk for the box shop, I make a motion to accept those as complete. All those in favor? All right. Okay, so now we move on to the site plan review for 26 Reed Lane. So we put some questions out, we received some correspondence back. Has everybody had a chance to read that, familiarize themselves with it? So I would say pretty cut and dry. It seems like it's going to be. Mr. Moreau, have you had a chance to read the emails that we received? Okay. Do you have any questions about any of that? Okay. So my understanding is, although it doesn't seem to be an impossibility, it seems to be a tall order. There are quite a few things that you would have to do. And if you're familiar, you've read the emails, I won't go back over it. You know,
we can't really specify what he has to do, can we? Because that would be tantamount.
well, I guess we could specify what the email said, but he has read them, so.
I want to ask one question about it. This is hypothetical, more for my learning curve than anything else. If the applicant lived in the building in which the garage was located, say he lived above it, would it then be considered a home occupation?
No, because the home occupation is a separate, I mean, this isn't specifically listed.
Because it's a specific.
Yeah, I mean, home occupation is sort of a lot of things, but they have to be, not everything, just because you do it at your house, makes it a home occupation.
You have to have a shop in your home, like I have, I think, to be a home occupation.
Yeah, there has to be like a certain amount of floor
A shop in
plan,
your home.
yeah, certain amount of floor plan that's like dedicated to it, yeah, exactly.
But it also serves more than two principal dwellings too, so.
Okay, so in regard to the Reed Lane application, are there any other questions you have for us? We're going to put it to a vote here.
Well, I don't think we can vote at a workshop, can we?
Well, this is an emergency meeting scheduled
Oh,
to
sorry,
make up for it.
apologize.
No worries.
I thought it was a workshop.
No, it's scheduled to make up for the actual meeting that was canceled. So are there any questions from the board about this before we put it to a vote? Any questions at all?
I'm just, concerned about, I understand he doesn't have any options based on the law, but I'm concerned about him having an ability to pursue his livelihood,
Right.
Well, I think,
Yeah,
I mean, I look at it two ways, like, this particular application as it stands right now, in my mind, it doesn't meet our ordinance. If it was to continue to stay there, I think some heavy negotiations would probably be done by parties, but you know, the other options are other locations that are properly zoned for that particular type of work.
You know, I would think that in a different situation, if you had a different right of way,
Sure.
other than that, but the fact that
If
the
it wasn't on your
butters are
lot.
so opposed to it, you know, sort of makes that a dicey thing to do.
That's why I say it doesn't, I wouldn't call it an impossibility, but it does seem to be a tall order. So that would be left up to the applicant to figure out. So I guess we have to judge it on the merits of what we have in front of us. So.
Yep.
So, I make a motion to, I guess I would say deny the application based on accessibility concerns.
Yeah,
Anybody want to second that motion?
a second.
All those in favor of denying the application? Okay, so it's unanimous. So you have your, I guess, you know, you have your papers and you know what you would need to do to move forward if possible.
Yes, has a right to appeal to the ZBA.
Absolutely, absolutely. You know, you have other avenues to go.
I read all the paperwork, it's cut and dry. It's all up in Ms. Wilson.
We appreciate your patience with us. Sorry we had to cancel last meeting.
No problem. Thank you for your time and your consideration.
I know.
Appreciate it.
All right, so I guess Lindsay will get out a notice of denial. I don't know, do we even send those?
Yeah,
Yeah,
or
we'll need to-
findings of fact.
Yeah,
findings
of fact.
Yeah, I really-
Which
All right,
is.
Lindsay will send any paperwork.
Yeah.
to me. All
No
right,
problem.
thank you, Mr.
Thank you for your time.
Okay, so now we would move on to, we really have to discuss the applicability of the Redemption Center in this next application. You know, we've received some stuff, we went out, taken a look. You know, Lindsay actually looked, she pulled up some stuff for us today.
Is that the way to do it?
Yeah, it's the, this is just some information about redemption centers. It might not apply specifically to. So there were a few problems with the sidewalk. I don't see Mr. LaValle, oh, there he is, I'm sorry, right in front of me. So I spoke to Jesse Winters, and the initial, the drop-off shed was initially thought to conform, but Jesse said no, it does not. It was placed there late, and it is, I think he said 30 feet from the road. He's not here tonight. He had some, he couldn't make it. So as far as clarification, I would maybe have to get him to clarify that at the next meeting. But we still have to discuss the zoning issues for the Redemption Center. And I did a little bit of research. Village residential seems pretty restrictive as far as our zones go. So if we think of it in terms of similar, you know, if we're supposed to look at what would be similar and where it's located, I looked at a few things, and if we look at things like, like a transfer station or a trucking, which it's not exactly those things, you know, we're gonna have to pick something close. It's not exactly trucking or things like that, but a lot of those things are prohibited in village residential.
Well, it is trucking to a degree that he has to have a truck come and take that stuff away.
Yeah, but what they're referring to, there's many more trips in the trucking that's referred to here as opposed to the Redemption Center. You know, again, it's not exactly trucking, but yeah, that's one.
So it's number of trips that makes it.
Well, I think so, but that's just one thing we've taken into consideration amongst other things
It's a
too.
distribution terminal, so it's.
That's
like
what I mean, yeah,
It's like where the trucks are starting out from.
Yeah, distribution
Like,
terminal
yeah.
is the better.
So like the FedEx plant, it's just like trucks constantly coming out every morning.
It seems like, you know, it's more like a transfer station because waste is being collected there and then transferred to another site.
Right, in part, yeah, it would be, you know,
Do we-
Except that it's pretty, very specific, you know,
Mhm.
not unlike a transfer station, it's very specific.
There were two redemption centers in this town before.
Right.
There's gotta be some
Yeah.
historical guidance.
Lindsay
on what
found
those-
some, she actually did that, she did some work and found the one that
Here's
was
some minutes that went to the planning board.
from,
One on Devereaux and 25.
25.
The other one on Elm Street, we don't have any record of.
Right,
I don't know
and
if it's-
Lindsay didn't mention that they treated
Yeah,
it
there was one
different.
on Elm Street.
Oh,
They
it's
actually
by the
sold-
Maple
The
Barn?
one on
Yes,
25?
okay, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious how those were defined, because
Right.
unless something had been removed between then and now.
That one, I believe was defined, I have the file, I can pull it, but it was defined as like a grocery store because they were selling beverages and doing a redemption center at the same
Right.
time, so it was kind of a dual part. And it was in Village,
Right.
not Village Residential.
Right, and because, so there was the old tire shed, which is now the General Dollar.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so that will end right
Yeah, and it requires DEP licensing permits as well, which is the information I found
Right.
last night.
This is one for everyone. This was minutes from, very long time ago.
I'm looking for where it was.
I'm just looking for,
I remember this one.
Oh, you do, huh?
Yeah, I was on,
so this is
I remember this.
residential.
So, Village residential is very restrictive though. I mean, it seems to be,
I mean, it's for anything
Specifies how
industrial
they
use,
treated it, though.
anything falls into that industrial use, it build residential, it's.
I wanna see what's permitted in village residential.
Yeah, it's almost,
I mean, it
you
is,
almost compare it to wholesale too. You know,
yeah.
Financially, I don't know.
What's a residential treatment facility?
Drug treatment, I think.
Is that what it was?
I think so. Right.
Or group home.
Commercial use is appropriate for a village area. That's what we have to decide. This is appropriate. The village residential, the purpose of the district is to provide for residential growth. And commercial use is appropriate for a village area.
Appropriate, it's pretty
And that's-
subjective
well,
word.
I know it is, but we have to come up with,
Well, that's what we're working on.
I know, I dealt with this when I applied to have my shop in my house. Mine is pretty quiet, it's so and so.
this is considered part of a historic village area, right? So, we as a planning board and as a town have to take a look at what historic means, whether we want to change that a little or prevent any.
But I think it has to be like recognized by the state, right, as being a historic village zone, just like Cornish, as their, so we're not, it's not.
I'm not
We,
sure.
we
I'm
as,
not
we
sure.
as residents can say it's historical, and I think we all
Right,
agree
right,
with
no,
that.
I mean, I'm not sure if it's accepted by the state,
Right.
but historic.
Yeah, so I think we have to, we have to fit it into, there is a village residential, there is no historical village residential, and I agree, like, we,
We have 6
we see that and
quote historic
Sure.
village areas.
Yeah, I mean, every village area is historical, right? I mean, they all happened in the past, so.
But ultimately it comes down to how we end up defining appropriate for a village.
Right.
You know,
Comes the question of time context, you know, those villages look very different 100 years ago. They
Yes.
have blacksmith shops, wheelwrights,
Yep, yep.
stores, now they don't have anything. So, houses, so, I mean, you know, what context do we use to define? I mean, I think the first thing we gotta do is decide if it fits any of these uses.
I mean, I would lean towards transfer station.
I would too.
You know, cause I think about like Eco-Maine, like, yeah, I know they do trash, but they do a lot of recyclables as
We'll
well.
lean that way with some
That's a
kind
transfer
of
station.
stipulations and limitations, and we can talk about that. Because it's only fair to consider the public input here. We need to have growth. Where do we have growth? We obviously, village areas will have to grow in some degree, and some degree commercially too, but how, you know, obviously that commercial growth in village areas is
So, I didn't think about that before, but you might have a good point there. If we are going to set something up that could, change things in the future, we might need to get a little bit of input from some folks in town
Yeah.
and because it's not just this one application, although we are dealing with this, and I like to do this in a timely manner for the applicant, for sure.
yeah.
But yeah, I think transfer station would probably be, as far as the chart goes.
Just seems weird, the transfer station in the village is prohibited use then.
Yeah.
Because,
You know, the other thing is apparently there's a precedent for there being this use in a village area, right? But this doesn't say what, this little minutes doesn't say what they considered it as.
Lindsay said it was considered, what, a grocer,
Grocery
because they,
Oh,
because they sold it,
sort of, so the, yeah, like the one that used to be on Elm Street.
Well, the other thing that we have to consider, I think, is environmental impact. If people have to drive all the way to Cornish to drop off their recyclables.
Or even farther, because I know a lot of
Or
people
even
don't like
further,
going.
right,
Yeah, right,
and
or
to have people nearby and less gas and less carbon into the atmosphere. I mean, we're on that track now that we have to be thinking about the climate.
Sure.
And when you have people drive too far for transfer station, you find a lot along the road, a
Right.
lot of rubbish along the road.
Right.
And that's something we want to prevent too if we
Right.
can.
So if we were to align it with the transfer station, that's immediately not,
It's still-
it's prohibited in village residential, so we would have to deviate from the transfer station and, maybe create or, discuss it a little more in detail.
Well, again, it comes down to discussing it with
We can't just
the
insert something
residents,
in there.
with the residents, and maybe there needs to be some kind of use limitations that we can,
I don't see that we could call like a public hearing on this until we define what it is.
Yeah,
You know,
Warehousing and storage.
that's the other one I was thinking of.
Maybe we
That's
need a.
still-
And is that prohibited in village residential though? So if we're gonna, categorize it as something that's on the chart here and is prohibited in village residential, it's a dead end right there.
Well, there's no industrial use on the
Right, but it
list.
does say
It does-
commercial, appropriate commercial
Right.
uses in village residential. So I think we have to let the public, at a public hearing, decide whether.
And then what, from there, say we got a positive response. Well, from there, if we got a positive response, would we have to do a warrant article to create a category for a redemption center?
It's
Is that-
really up to the planning board to decide where does this fit in the table.
So, again, if we're gonna decide where it fits in the table, and we're looking at things that are prohibited in village residential, then it's not gonna work, or we have to say, all right, well, we're gonna make a special
We
category.
need to agree on, as a board, what we are going to compare it to.
Well, I think
And
we-
then what that is
I
what
think we picked
what it
some
is.
good ones, right? So, which is
So,
start with
I
the
think
transfer
that's the
station,
process.
or a, what was the
I think anything in the past that may inhibit the possibility, like using the transfer station because it is not permitted use. I don't think we should
What?
put that in
I
the
know.
transfer, we have to come up with another term.
Yeah,
But to
so
come up with another term,
It's
though,
not
we have to have an
how-
ordinance
Yeah.
that states that we have to have a.
We have to
Well,
apply,
this is
we
why
have
the
to rely it to
comprehensive
what
plan,
we
this is why
have,
we all
right?
have to get together and work on
Well,
it.
the comprehensive plan doesn't
Whole-
drive our decisions. This is what drives our decisions.
I understand that,
And
but
it's-
here's the
I
deal.
can't, like, we go over
Well,
this
right,
every
Here's the
single
deal,
year.
listen, let me just state one
Right
thing.
now,
real
that's
quick.
not what we're.
Southern Maine Planning and Development Commission said what comes first is comprehensive plan, and then everything follows after that. These are the executive director who's been there 20 years.
This is a little off track. I
No,
mean,
it isn't.
like,
It is
this
off
has to
track,
do
and
with the
he's
zoning
right, but it
ordinances
doesn't
in front of
matter.
you guys.
Even
Like,
if we
this
have a
is
new
state law.
comprehensive plan, our ordinances, until they get changed, are gonna be our ordinances, and right now, this is what we're dealing with.
I know.
So what I can say is I share Cliff's concern that it would probably be a great idea if we had a transfer station, a redemption center in town. If we can do that in the future, that'd be great, but if we're looking at this right now and we're saying, all right, we're gonna have to figure out, where we picked a few out, all right? As far as the chart goes here, transfer station, warehouse and storage, anything else that you see on there? Because so far, those are all prohibited, and if we go with those, again, that's, like I said, the application's dead in the water. I don't see anything that's actually allowable that jumps out at me in village residential that we could compare it to.
They weren't thinking way back then.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't have
about
redemption centers when they,
redemption,
yeah,
exactly right, so this
So
is
they-
a new.
such a thing.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. So I think that's unique in itself,
These aren't that old.
right, but I don't think they had redemption centers when this was, otherwise I would have assumed it would have
Like I
been.
said, like I said, we've had 3 in the town.
Right,
So-
and well, what they did is they probably opened them before we had these.
Or they open them as a, was that.
Well, the one on
accessory.
25 was.
We had a lot of places that
Commercial
were
zone.
grocery stores or gas stations.
The
one on
Commercial.
25 was in
not just-
Village,
that
and they
was
did
why.
it for retail
Always
business less than 4,000 square feet, because they were selling beverages.
Right.
Yeah, that was the difference.
If there, cause there's, I mean, that's the only other one that I could potentially see it going under is the retail business, but it's technically not, there's no retail. There's
It's
just
not
a
retail,
vendor, so,
it's not selling anything.
so I mean.
Trucking is the only other one.
Okay, so if we were stuck in a corner where we could not approve this because it doesn't fit in our permissible uses, would an avenue for Mr. LaValle be to institute a warrant article, or to say, okay, so it's not approvable as is now, but maybe we could have a warrant article and the town could vote on it and maybe have the option to open a redemption center?
Well, he could, he'd just have to get it on the warrant, you just have to get the signatures and follow the process, anybody can.
That would really be the only way to keep it.
And then we would have to approve it,
Well, the board
and
could
if we
also
approve
choose-
it, it goes to a simple majority, if we don't, it goes to a 2/3 supermajority.
I would think
With
we'll
anything.
go to a public hearing.
Would, say again?
Public hearing.
But the thing is we can call a public hearing, but when it comes down to it, everything that this particular application falls under is still not prohibited in that zone right now.
He is prohibited.
I'm sorry, it is prohibited in this zone. That's why I don't like using prohibited. It's too backwards.
So there has to be something brand new created.
It will have, yeah.
If it was to be approved, if we were to work with the permissible uses we have now, and we're looking under village residential, anything even close, it's not allowed in village
Right, it's
residential.
not trucking, it's not.
Yeah, it's not, you're right, it's not, but it's, those are the, if we go through the list, I mean, it's certainly not a dry cleaner or a car wash, so we have to choose the things that it is closest to, and that would be something like a transportation or transportation or a distribution center, or, I don't see anything else here that would,
Distribution center is prohibited.
It
yeah,
is.
Yeah.
unfortunately.
We'll go for it.
How about we create a category called recycling?
Could be, but it would have to be done through the warrant article process, I think.
Right, and maybe it's time to go that route.
I'm not opposed to that, I'm not
But
opposed
it's
to
not gonna
that.
happen during this application, you know what I mean?
Correct, we have to
Yes.
stop the application, get together for an oral warrant article, have a bunch of people
Yep.
come to a public
I mean,
meeting, and whatever the vote.
I think
was.
adding that in here for clarification would be a great idea.
And to take into consideration people in the village there, all feelings, we need to put maybe some limitations in terms of square footage
Yeah.
for
yeah,
storage
it's all-
and stuff
it's all
and
part
all
of
that.
It's all part of that, yeah.
That was
But mind you, you're also focusing on
Yeah, we got.
recreational marijuana,
Yeah,
food
we got a lot of
sovereignty.
stuff.
We do.
But there's nothing to prevent the applicant from bringing that warrant article.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, even though regardless of how we vote, I mean, I think it's, obviously we can still, through a majority vote, still hear an application again, we don't have to wait 2 years.
Right.
And certainly, I think if, something like that would occur, it
And,
would seem reasonable to at least review an application.
and at that meeting, one of us could stand up representing the planning board and say, we're in favor of this redefinition. You know, we can support his work, maybe with certain square footage limitations.
Yeah, so nothing we've addressed actually addresses your property so far. So, there could be potential issues there too, but we're, as far as the zoning and land use, we've hit a stumbling block there. So it does seem to me that, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't
No,
hear.
go ahead.
Well, if you are looking towards denying it, you might wanna just pick something,
Yeah,
cause you've got
let's-
an
we need to
issue
vote
of
on it.
denying it based off of.
We will ultimately.
Right.
We haven't got there.
Which would, that would say what, it's not a permissible use for the zone, I guess would be the reason it would be denied.
It would be denied because the closest listed use on the table,
Which would-
is gonna be whatever we pick it is. If it happens to not be allowed, then that's why this would.
Well, we could say the closest 3 equivalent uses are all non-permitted.
But we need to make
So
clear that
I would
that
make a
it's
motion.
board's decision.
Yeah, I would make a motion then to compare this then to the transfer station.
All right, so I guess, before we actually vote on this, are any questions from the board? Any, you understand the path forward for you would be the warrant article.
Well, I would say no on transfer station because it's not a transfer station.
I agree.
Is there anything else that we can deny permit on? Was it a
Well,
building too close?
the things that it would be there's issues there, but that's, why would we even go there when it's, there were some trouble, but, there's several things
There's
here.
also solutions available to a lot of those problems.
So yeah, it's not a trucking distribution terminal, but it's also, again, we have to pick what's closest, so that would be.
What do you think, Andy, what do you think is
I
closest?
think it's close to a transfer station.
I think so,
Okay, and Rick, you
I would
say?
say transfer station.
Nate, what do you say?
Transfer station.
And again, it's not a transfer station, we know that, but we have to choose something from the
So
terminal.
how the article
That's
is
the
written in the town
closest.
warrant is key.
Yeah.
We have to say, there's a person who wants to do a redemption center, and the closest thing we can find is a transfer station, but the planning board recommends, because of the not really being a transfer station.
Well,
We
you
have to
wouldn't
say.
write that in the warrant article, you would come up with a defined ordinance and present that. That's kind of the
I
only.
mean, I'm, transfer station's definitely, it's.
I would think that's the
I look at,
closest.
I look at the warehousing and storage, but it's not,
All right, so, do you have any questions, Mr. LaValle, before we put this to a vote, or any other input you wanted to? I know you'd say it's not a trucking terminal, it's not, I agree,
It's
but
not a transfer station,
it's a redemption center, right, yeah, but.
Maybe we should put that in the article, we can say, we have to deny it because it's a redemption center, which we don't have a definition for in village, yeah.
I think, maybe we'll address the article when we get to it, right? Right now, I guess maybe what we should do is just stick with the application, and if the article comes up before us, then we'll tackle it, we'll grab a hold of it, so.
As far as the application itself is concerned, I think it might be of service to Mr. LaValle, regardless how we vote on this, that he know what concerns we have specific to the property.
Right.
Because then he can make a more informed decision whether he wants to go through.
So I could mention the drop-off shed. I do think there was a problem with that. Again, Jesse Winters, the code enforcement officer, would know specifically, but I think if the application were approved at any point, you would probably have to rework that drop-off shed.
Actually removed.
Yeah. So that was just the one thing off the top of my head. I don't know if there's anything else that.
well, there's the site distances, they were definitely.
Yeah, there were-
They were definitely close on one direction, the lower one seemed like it might have been, but, verification there, and also it's considered an entrance, so it would have,
You'd have to
a lot of the
upgrade it.
conditions, and if approved, any conditions would have to involve widening and paving through the states right away and all that, to meet their, because you'd have to get the permit from them anyways.
You're saying the state would have to widen and
No, you would. You'd have to have, that driveway would, because of what it would be used for, would be considered an entrance under DOT rules. That's, at least that's my understanding. You know, based on what they provide.
I was told that state has a right of way of 25 feet, and they're responsible for up to 25 feet.
It has to be paved to the right of way, whether they do it or you do
To
it.
their right, to their right of way.
Pretty, yeah,
Yeah.
pretty sure.
DOT right of way. Okay?
And wide, and it has to meet, you know, the other criteria, which is 22 feet wide or whatever, and their site distances as well as the towns, which are more restricted, which are farther, I shouldn't say more restricted, farther.
Okay, so I think we're gonna have to put it to a vote here and move on. I guess what I would say is, I would make a motion to deny the application.
Sorry, have we finalized our vote for what would you
I
say?
mean, I think we've all agreed on transfer.
Yeah, transfer station. But so the way I would word it, I would make a motion to deny the application based on, non-conformity with permissible uses, for a transfer station.
Redemption center.
What, say again?
It's not conformity for a transfer station, but it's conformity for a redemption center.
It can't be conformed for redemption center.
We have to compare it to
Yeah, we
something
don't
that
have
exists in
any,
the ordinance.
we don't have anything that would say how a redemption center would be conformed, so we can't say,
And the
Well,
ordinance
the first
requires that we
before-
compare it to one that is defined.
The wording you wanted to put in there.
right, what we'll do is if this were to be brought with a warrant article, then we could figure out
There was a
how,
warrant article.
that's how we would initiate the process to actually create a permissible use for a redemption center. So that would require signatures, in town, maybe I think 90 signatures to have the warrant article initiated, and then the town would vote on it. So as far as that goes, we would have to address that process in the future. Right now, what we have to do is address the application, so.
Okay, we're just addressing the application.
Yes, sir, yes, sir. And, you know, again, this is not the end of it for you if you don't want to. I think you do have recourse in the future, but again, we have to move on. So we're gonna go ahead and put this to a vote, and again, I think the best way to structure this is I say, I'll make a motion to deny the application based on, non-conformity with the table of permissible uses for the, yeah, and for the village residential zone as a transfer station. So I make a motion to deny the application.
Second.
All those in favor? All right, so it's unanimous. Okay, all right, Mr. LaValle, so Lindsay will send in paperwork to you to notify. And again, I don't, you know, there's potential that you could have this done in the future, but you might need to institute the warrant article.
Well, I heard something about 3 years.
No, that's actually for another, that applies to a specific water extraction in town. That's the 2 year. Yeah, that's not, that doesn't apply to you.
I could be gone in 2 years.
Yeah, so we all could.
You know, I'm not that man. I gotta talk to him for a minute.
Okay, so now we move on to the box.
Well,
Let's
when
see,
it
what
was
do we have
everything
here?
sent out,
Yes,
so I can get to you.
Right, honey?
Yep. and you'll get reimbursed for some of the
Some of the what?
escrow money we deposited.
Yeah.
Yeah, what we didn't use, you'll get reimbursed.
Okay, so that comes with paperwork, you
I gotta get the select board to do a check, so once it's separate.
Okay. Now, what is a warrant? Where I get signatures and it's.
And the thing about business
You have an old warrant
is,
there?
there's really no
You know, when you go to
year-round
the town meeting?
business.
You ever been to a town
But
meeting?
there are-
You see
Maybe 3.
a booklet with a little
Very
article?
few.
You don't go to the town meeting? Can you get them an old warrant? Give them
I
an old
could
warrant?
find out
give 'em
exactly
out.
how many there
Oh.
are.
But, you know what?
There aren't many,
This is our ordinance of how you do an amendment to the ordinance.
and the ones that are
Yep, so if you
fairly
wanted
easy
to add redemption center,
every year.
this is the application, so what we're talking about, yeah, what we're talking about is an individual group. So like, this is what you would
I
have to
could
do.
go down and count it.
I just take this with I'll replace mine.
So as far as the box shop goes,
You can keep this.
I don't really know, so we have couple options here. You see, meetings got canceled, so,
So I'll probably be
no,
checking.
we had sidewalk, wasn't really much interest, I mean, nobody really seems to oppose
Yeah, give
it. We
Carl
have to
your
determine
questions
whether we're
quick.
going
Oh, yeah, I
to
have a phone.
Okay.
Okay.
vote on the application tonight,
I do
or
that.
if we need to hold a public hearing. I mean, if we were to hold a public hearing, I don't really expect anybody to show up, but if we were, it would be before the next meeting.
Well,
Jesse?
I'm not trying to like rush you through it or like hide anything.
I
I brought it up at the town meeting
Right,
and asked for money to work on it for a salt shed. Before I realized I had to bring it
right,
for you guys.
right.
And there was no, granted, there was still only like 35 people, but there was no
Right.
opposition.
Yeah, and there wasn't at the sidewalk either.
We got one
And-
letter from an abutter just expressing some kind of vague concern, but nothing much, that was
Right.
it. Usually we get letters from abutters if
Right.
there was a problem with
And
AV
there
or.
really aren't many of us.
No,
Yeah.
there really
There's
isn't.
only 3 people that live on, four families that live on that street, and we're all near the top.
Right.
And almost no one is there for the winter.
Right.
Right.
I can think of one that's there for the winter, and that's all I can think of.
Right.
That woman that just bought that green trailer was there.
So the town, does the town own the land?
Yeah.
Yes, it
Yes.
has
For
for 15 years maybe.
So you don't see any problem with having the salt shed and then having the solar farm?
No, they were actually, they offered as part of the deal, if, granted, that's if the solar farm is like a big if, because there's 2 other people in line in front of us. But they offered to fence around the building separate from their thing, so our building would also be fenced in with a gate.
So prior,
Really
so,
can't.
I apologize, I was absent for a little bit of this. Prior to this, it was across from South Hiram, is that right?
Correct.
Was that our only salt and sand place?
No, we have another one in Maplewood,
On Maplewood?
yes.
Okay, so this would basically be, now, we'd have still the same amount of places,
Correct.
but
We had
we'd
to
have more
pay-
control, would we have more control?
We're renting, we're leasing.
We
from-
were leasing.
From Hiram,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
It's Hiram Salt Shed.
Correct.
Oh, okay, and so we just had access.
In the, yeah, there was just a small salt shed, no sand shed, so now we have both undercover.
Okay.
And there's been a DEP waiver issued, so as far as anything like that, that's been looked at by DEP already.
And to clarify, I had to get a variance. Cliff mentioned it the first time we talked about it, why there was a variance, and I couldn't remember at the time, but the variance was because it was a Brownsfield, but the Brownsfield's actually over across the street. But because it was part of the property, she had to come out and look at it, because you can only do so many things with a Brownsfield.
That's like the
That was
dump
the
waste area?
disposal that they closed,
Fenced
capped
off.
off.
Yeah.
No, not that, there's a
Oh.
little field over there.
Oh, okay.
And so that's why she had to come look. And the only issue she had was don't dig in that area, but we had no reason to even be over there. It had nothing to do with the salt shed. So,
So, where we're at is we have to decide if we need a public hearing. Personally, I'm not opposed to not having a public hearing, but we have to put it to a board vote. I don't know how everybody else feels.
I don't see any reason for it, I mean, everybody knows this is happening.
Yeah,
It seems
You know, I
in
mean,
the public's
it's-
interest,
Right. It's
not been kept a secret,
especially
no.
if we don't have to lease, that location any longer.
So maybe we'll put it to a vote. I don't know how to word this. So I would say, make a motion to waive the public hearing for the application on the box shop.
Second.
All those in favor? Okay, so that means we can vote on it tonight then. And I don't really have any questions. I don't know if you have any questions, Nate? I mean, the sidewalk was pretty easy.
The only concerns I heard from anyone was, were neighbors with children, but they felt it was safe to,
Right.
because there's a fence behind
It's
them.
been abandoned in there for
It
Right.
was probably
It's been
safer
right.
than it was
Yeah,
because
it's-
there's not
I
so
was gonna
many drug transactions going on now as there
No.
was.
Oh, and
And hopefully, even if the solar doesn't go through, we're gonna bring it to the town about chipping that whole lot, so it's like open, so nobody can dump stuff, cause right now people are dumping stuff in the woods behind the building.
That was one concern that I heard mentioned, that the sidewalk was just, and maybe you guys have already done it, that pile of like refuse right in front of the building.
No, nothing has been done with that
It'd be
yet.
nice if that was done.
Right.
That'll all be gone because
Yeah.
winter, we're not gonna
gonna bother
Yeah.
cleaning that up till we can clean up the whole area.
Yep.
I don't think there's much problem.
And we plan on
with that.
painting the end of the building
Yeah.
that's still, I really wanna keep the graffiti, but we're gonna end up painting.
You wanna keep it.
I also think that even
So
though
that's
it
nine.
appears to be a long shot for the solar farm, I think it's probably gonna happen. So I want everybody to be thinking, will the solar
So you guys
farm,
have already gone
will
through
the
the.
salt shed, will they work together well?
That's complete.
They were all for it, we talked about it with them and.
Okay.
I think it would work. yes.
Okay.
I like it.
Straightforward.
I think it's gonna happen, it's gonna be 2
Wasn't really
years.
concerned.
Maybe a year and a half.
All right, so are there any questions about the application here? Any questions about the application at all? So I make a motion to accept the application as approved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Oh, wait a minute. Is Clifford a voting member?
Actually, no.
Second.
So we can't second.
I
so-
second.
All right, all those in favor? All right, it's unanimous. Thanks for the second. All right, so that's done. So we've got a couple of things that we want to here. We'll see how quick we can bang these out here. So what do we have? The warrant article for recreational marijuana. I'm still, I think you're the most informed one on this, you know. I think,
You wanna know about it?
yeah, I think I've been kind of confused. I don't know, what do we have to do?
So, my understanding is the select board has asked you guys to kind of come up with adopting either an ordinance or an opt-in, or however you wanna go about it. It's a little, I know it's a little confusing, but what municipalities can do is they can opt in with nothing, and an opt-in would allow state regulations, and that's it, so there's no zoning regulations, it would just be state law. You can opt in with a moratorium and decide to craft an ordinance when you can, like you did with medical.
Right.
However, if you opt in with a moratorium and that ordinance you craft gets shot down, you revert back to the opt-in and now it's allowed by state law and there's
Right.
no zoning.
So the way I look at that is that would at least give us a chance as a town to craft it the way we want it, whereas opposed to
Or-
initially the other way would just go right with the state.
Actually, I think,
so.
yeah, I think the other way we did it was, you can, the third option is you can opt in with an ordinance, so you can do
Right.
it all
Right.
kind of bundled
Well,
together.
I mean, I thought we've discussed this over and over.
We have.
The one that we've come up with is that we've decided this time around to just go with the simple yes or no, opt in.
Right.
That we'll
Well,
have to do it with the moratorium.
yeah, I think that's probably the best. The
Right.
idea of, do you want to opt in, and if we do opt in, the moratorium is in effect until the board crafts the actual ordinance.
Well, is it gonna be until, or is it,
Town
or is it,
ordinance.
or is it
Well,
like a
you
time
have,
frame?
it's, the timeframe is 180 days.
But you can
So
extend
6
it.
months, I think, or something like that, 6 months, but the select board can extend the moratorium.
Right.
If you need more time. There's certain, I think I gave you guys a packet from
No, I mean,
MMA.
I mean, we've hashed that, I mean, I've looked at that stuff, I don't know if anyone else has read it, but I mean, my thought is that that's really, based on what we've talked about before, that that's the route we should go. is
Right.
I would-
Yes or no vote
Opt in
with a
with a
moratorium.
When it
Keep
comes
it real
to,
simple.
Because the whole idea is we don't wanna spend all the time crafting, going,
Yeah,
we
that's
did
what we
6
talked
months of
about this.
workshops
Yeah.
and.
We talked about this 3 or 4
Right.
times.
Screaming
So we just need
matches.
to pull the trigger on it then.
Yeah.
So this comes down to,
Not to
do we need to come up with the wording and actually present an article? Is that where we're at?
yeah,
So
No,
so,
no, we have to come up with the wording, then we have to give it to the.
Yeah,
select
you're
you're gonna
board
have to have a
approve
public
it.
hearing on it first, well, no, I'm sorry, you're gonna have to come up, listen, I'm sorry. You can do a public information meeting if you want a little more input before you decide on the wording on the article, but then you have the public hearing once you've decided we're gonna vote to opt in with a moratorium. It can be a
That's pretty
simple
much it,
worded
right?
one, but you'd still gotta have a public hearing on it. And you need something to present at the public hearing, but, so however you wanna go about that, that's fine.
I think we just go with that simple.
Simple one?
Just keep it
Uh,
simple.
Does
I-
the town wanna opt in?
Ultimately, the
The
final,
moratorium.
you know, you'll get, once we've had the hearing, we vote on it, and we approve it.
So I can tell you, if the wording were left up to me, it would be that simple. It would
Yeah.
be very simple. I think we have a wordsmith over here. I don't know who wants to word it, but for me, it would just say, does the town want to opt in, yes or no?
With
With
more-
a
Two.
moratorium.
To, you know, to the new, we have
Opt
to,
into the state.
we think, be really clear on what it is, you know, all
Just follow
the
the state law.
states.
is what you
Well,
do.
let me
Regulation.
clarify, let me
State
clarify that.
regulations.
If you're opting in with a moratorium,
With the moratorium, we can craft our own.
You-
and
there-
maybe be more
it's
stringent if we want to.
prohibited until you enact an ordinance.
Right, and what's prohibited is the retail side, that's, I
It's
mean,
the
people,
recreational marijuana.
right, but people are allowed to do their own
They
things
can-
that they're allowed to do with their
Correct.
house, right? That's not prohibited.
I think
But
the change
the
is
commercial
just
side of it is
that-
prohibited.
Yeah.
So if we were to do it with moratorium, it wouldn't affect the individuals in town, but it would prevent the moratorium for the business side of it while we crafted the
So we
ordinance.
should craft it and make a delineation between personal use.
But we don't even have to do that, I
Yeah,
think it's already been
actually,
made for us.
municipalities don't have authority to
Yeah.
regulate personal use.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Except for maybe subdivisions, because, you can give written permission to somebody to grow on your property. You can do that to 100 people if you want to, and have 300 plants on your property, or however many.
Huh.
That might be considered a subdivision, and
Hmm,
municipalities
that's
can
interesting.
try to word that and
I
put
just
that in
thought
their
about
regulation.
I
that.
don't see
Yeah.
people really doing that.
No,
I don't
no.
see
I
much
got 3.5
interest in
acres.
Yeah,
that.
right, I don't know, my,
So
we're
we're
keeping my
gonna,
interest.
we're gonna stick with that, keep it simple. and,
Yep.
Yeah, so, again, does the town want to opt into recreational marijuana, what,
With a moratorium.
with a,
Chill ordinance.
But I mean, again, like, we're saying recreational,
yeah, recreational, what, recreational,
It's recreational marijuana facilities.
facilities, there
Yeah,
you go.
that's the specific.
Yeah, cause if you just leave it at recreation.
And it has to, well, it has to relate to the state
You
law.
know, what's gonna happen, because it's a little bit confusing for people who don't follow it closely. If we write, I mean, I think that wording is fine, that's what we should use, we might wanna give them an information sheet too.
We did that
Well,
last time.
We'll get-
you'll
we're
have
gonna
a public hearing,
Yeah.
I mean,
and,
we
yeah.
did everything but like hold people's, like pen when they did the
get the,
vote.
get the short bus and go
It's all
out the
there,
door.
it's like, I don't, it's hard to get, I mean, at some point you have to, it has to be explained, it has to be written out what it is. And you can only cut so much of it out and then it doesn't pass muster, so, I don't know.
I don't see it
Well-
being that widespread now. Most people just do a little bit they want themselves and,
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but.
it's really
but it's-
different than it was before when people tried to sell and everything. Now it's
Right.
just,
But you know, I look at it this way as like, you know, what this is gonna do is this is gonna open up like large out-of-state operations that could come in and potentially, you know, set up large grow
Don't want
shops.
that.
Right, so that's why I want us to have the time to, if we're gonna opt in,
Condition.
to then
Yeah.
make it
Yeah,
feel Parsonsfield if it's gonna happen, not this, cause I think the state level is gonna be,
Too broad.
it's gonna open up a lot of big money out of state. And,
The thing is, you don't see it, but there's a lot of growers already in town.
absolutely.
You know, I mean, I just ran into one the other day, I had no idea it was there.
Yeah.
Big building full of weed,
Right.
you know? And as soon as if this goes yes, those people opposed do their thing, you know? So I agree, we need time to carefully consider it if it's accepted.
But we need to get the ball moving, we have to get the ball moving.
so does that mean
Sure.
that we've determined the wordage, the verbiage,
Okay,
and,
so, to opt in to recreational marijuana facilities with a moratorium to allow the board to create a zoning ordinance?
sure.
Okay,
The town is
Well,
ready,
to allow the town to create and approve
okay, yeah, yeah.
ordinances.
the town is ready to opt in
And then,
and then on a moratorium, but we need the public's.
Right, so we get the public hearing out of the way for this part, and then eventually the town, it'll be brought to the town to vote whether we opt in or not. If we opt in, then there's a moratorium allowing us time to actually do it. If they opt out, then we don't have to do any more work.
Yeah, and I think if they opt in, that's when we have a public hearing, right? That's when we're gonna start crafting
No,
ordinances.
I
I
no,
think-
we have to have a
well, you gotta
public reading
public hearing about this.
We'll have another
before.
one once
Yeah.
we're actually crafting
Right.
the
Yeah.
ordinances, so that'll be.
And then,
All right.
I know it's ahead, but like when you do get to the point of doing the ordinance, if it comes to that, you know, you guys can decide, you can cap a limit on how many of each facility.
Right.
Or you can say, we're not gonna allow this one, but we'll allow this one.
We have a lot of work we can put into it, but I
Yeah.
think
I
we
would
have to get
rather-
the
I would
vote.
rather get the
Yes,
vote,
because
because
if
we
it gets
spent-
voted down, then it's not,
Then you don't have to worry
it's
about it.
it's off the table.
So, the food sovereignty ordinance.
You don't wanna-
Oh, I'm sorry,
I just
Jason.
had a quick question, and maybe you can't answer it now, but like, so about the marijuana thing, there's already like a half a dozen, maybe more, I don't know, that I know about that are growing like commercial.
Yeah.
really?
What
Yeah,
do we do with those what if we, I mean, how do you enforce that, because they're already here, even if they're illegal, I don't even know if they're legal or illegal.
We don't enforce anything.
Well, I know, but how do we, I mean.
You
can
do
we-
via the employee of the CEO.
Yeah, well, I mean, if that's in our ordinances, can
Yeah, I see what
we
you're saying.
go even though they're already set up?
Yeah, so
Like,
they're already existing, and then our ordinances are implemented, and it contradicts what they're doing, what happens then? I have no
Well,
idea,
yeah.
I really don't know.
Well, I don't know,
But
I
they
mean, it's
can't-
not like a residential use where you can grandfather it.
Right,
It's a
I
matter of
mean,
law.
if they're doing it now, it's under, it's under
Whatever
the
people are
radar.
doing now is.
Well, it's
is
not on the
legal.
radar though.
Or not,
Right.
it's legal, it's what they're doing to conform with current stuff,
Right.
medical, who knows, whatever.
And again, this is really gonna, does this even address cultivation, or is this more
This
just?
does actually address cultivation, and there's a lot of tiers, so the largest tier for cultivation is a 20,000 square foot.
Yeah,
building.
yeah, yeah, we can't even have a building that big in
Yeah,
town, so,
right.
you know,
Um,
I think 15,000
yeah.
is the limit on our buildings.
One question,
Yes, sir.
on the state regulating these, what I'm most concerned about is how many of these storefronts are we gonna have in?
Right, we can actually put a, that's what Lindsay just said, we can put a limit on that, and
That's
I,
all, that's.
I wouldn't see, I wouldn't
We
see
gotta
room
vote
for
on
more
it
than
first.
one in this town, really, but who knows? I mean, we can put a limit on that, and when we craft the ordinances, we can say there will not be more than 2 or 1 or 3 or whatever.
If the town opts in and allows this, I mean, to me, just reading what they did with the medical side, they denied that.
What?
The luck, the chance of them
And-
approving
Right.
recreational seems really slim
No
to me.
one's-
But if it's done, then we can limit it, we can limit hours, we can limit size of the square footage, we can do all that, and we will.
Well,
I might add too,
Is
that the
no one really
ordinances that
any
you've already put forward
Because
are
people
still
well, they
in good shape.
The medical ones that we did?
Yeah, the medical-
Yeah, I mean, I see if the town opts, if the town does opt in, we at least have a
Right,
jump.
but we're
in.
not,
Sure,
we're not
sure,
there,
yeah.
we're not, I
Yeah,
mean, they either
exactly.
gotta opt in, or if the town doesn't opt in, then it's done. You know, we're not gonna draft anything.
Well, the state still puts a very, very high price on a license too for it, $10,000.
Yeah, I think-
Well,
I
and
think
these are all
having
things that we,
town
part of the
fee
discussion,
structure-
when we- if and when we get there, but we gotta get there, you know?
If we don't get there, we need to have ordinances to make sure that people don't get crazy.
So should we, do we need to then, are we setting up a public
Yeah.
hearing?
Yeah, so
for
the
this?
next step is do a public hearing, or we're gonna say what you guys just worded for a warrant article.
So what about a public hearing before our next meeting, would that,
Well, we'll get,
Not
we
possible?
need 2 shoppers guides for ordinance amendments.
okay,
right?
so it wouldn't make it for the next meeting?
Yeah, it'd have to be.
So we'd have to have a
because I can get
special-
one in for the 15th and 22nd.
I mean, we could schedule it for the next workshop day, we could schedule it for, or just before the next meeting. you
No,
know.
Well,
I'm sorry, yeah, the earliest you could do it would be the 30th, January 30th is the earliest.
Right, but
So
that
we
would
can
be
have-
a special day for it, when we could just go with the next workshop day in
You could.
February.
Yeah.
Or again-
Tuesday evening, I think it's gonna be a hot button issue, you probably should do it on Saturday.
Oh, yeah, as the guy who's leaving.
Well,
He said, take your Saturday off,
I
because
would
he's
say
gonna be out of
that
the
I was
country.
leaving it on.
Oh, I'm sorry.
no, we've had, the last one, the medical marijuana one of the big ones was as at night.
I could
There were
do
more
it on-
people there for that special town vote than there were anything else.
February 4th, 7 o'clock,
That's what, Tuesday?
Tuesday.
So,
It's our
that's a
workshop.
workshop, scheduled
Yeah.
workshop?
I like
Well,
that.
it's
I
not,
like
are you doing a
utilizing
public
that
hearing or a workshop?
We will do a public.
That's,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a
Taking
scheduled
it in
workshop
place.
that maybe we could, go ahead and utilize for our public hearing.
I'm all about using those days.
Sure, we plan around being here for those days anyway, right?
When we do a Saturday.
Now, because of snow and all, do we want to schedule like a
Oh, yeah.
cancellation date?
Let's
To be
do
on the
it.
safe side?
What would we say, the following
Following
Tuesday,
Why
just in
not?
case?
11th?
Why not? We'll get it
So what is
screwed.
the first date, February?
February 4th, 7 PM,
The backup day of the 11th.
public
7 p.m.
hearing and workshop, I mean, we'll have the workshop too. or-
I don't know if we're gonna need it.
February 4th,
I don't think
7
we need it,
p.m.
just use the day as a
We're
public.
not gonna work, what's there to workshop again?
I don't know, is there anything?
No, and that's the thing, is our public hearing, it's gonna,
I mean,
just
the
like a
other
public
two
hearing, if you have
things,
to draft ordinance, it's gonna go on.
we have food sovereignty and then the definition of density was,
Right.
originally we wanted to have workshops on that, but it just never came to fruition.
Right, well, food sovereignty was a big one, you know, I don't know if we, I mean, where are we with that?
Everything was all ready to go, I think we had an article
I,
ready to
I
do a warrant,
emailed.
and, I think
So, you guys are drafting an ordinance for food.
It was all drafted, Tiffany had everything to go, and David said something that can't go in the warrant because, and what he said because wasn't true, it could have gone in the warrant. But we should be able to get a copy of that because I think.
We've got it, it was in an email to him.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I sent it to you
I
guys.
think we're ready to go, because there's probably 10 or 15 other towns in the state of Maine that have already adopted it, it's not a, you know,
The
we can,
food sovereignty.
yeah. Yeah, we can bring it up. if we
What
want. We can-
exactly does that say?
Basically, what it's doing is it's permitting people to sell to neighbors. No meat, just vegetables, but no meats. Meats
What
fall
about
under.
cheeses?
I think so.
Dairy,
You can do
cheese.
dairy, yeah, yeah, so,
Yogurt.
yeah, you can do all that stuff and vegetables to your neighbors.
Meat is still, they have some provisions in the state if you're under a certain limit. Like I think if you do under so many chickens, you're still, you know, you can still do it.
Possibly.
Yeah, but if you go over a certain number, then you have to get into.
Yeah, it gets
It
tricky.
sounds like we need to review this
So-
before we do any
Yeah, so
voting, right?
can we, so we can't do this now? Like I see I see like little
Yeah, no,
stands
we
out
can,
front.
yeah, right, no, we can and we have been, but I think this codifies it in law, I think, you know, there's
So
a.
I was like-
That has
I was like,
been
this,
going
that
on.
This is
that
basically
seems
what
like
we're-
day-to-day
Yeah,
life.
yeah, yeah.
like-
No, no, right, well, we're
Like we're gonna pass an ordinance to read
codifying-
too.
we're codifying it in law. So
Okay.
also, you can have a little farm stand on your property
Yeah, yeah.
for neighbors that are coming through, or even if there's tourists, they can buy from you. And this protects
Okay.
people.
Yep.
Yeah, to me, it seems like we've already been doing that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Anyway.
But
Nothing's
we're making it
changed.
legal, we're
Because
making
it
it
keeps getting
legal.
thrown, food sovereignty, and I'm like.
Yeah, right,
We're making it legal.
All of a sudden, it's a new invention,
Yeah,
dude.
yeah, well,
Well,
You've been doing it.
We're making it, codifying it before corporations
But-
decide.
Oh, I
Don't
think
even
that's
care.
necessary, yeah,
Right,
yeah,
right.
yeah.
Required.
So as far as that goes, we say Tiffany pretty much did the legwork on that, there is one out there, and, I mean,
That's all we need.
we just push it forward, huh?
Yeah,
Well-
a town, you know,
You
will have
gotta
to
have a public hearing, just like.
have
you-
public.
So
hearings,
then
same
maybe
way.
it would probably be good to do it at the same time?
I think so.
Do you got,
You
are
don't
you
think
presenting
so?
that at the public hearing? Do you know what you're presenting? I mean, have all of you read it?
What,
Is it-
for the,
you-
food sovereignty
Yeah.
one, that's right?
I haven't read the
I
whole
have
thing
not,
yet.
honestly,
Yeah.
I have
I
not,
read
so.
it, but I forgot what it said.
Yeah,
I would say,
we could do a workshop.
Why don't we have a workshop before and we each have a copy of it?
Yeah.
So,
Then how about having, what do you think, the workshop on the 4th, to have it for food sovereignty after the public hearing would be too much?
okay, so we have,
I mean, potentially the
What's-
public hearing
what's
could
on the
be.
agenda?
I mean, it costs money to have a, you know,
Oh, yeah.
I think
Forgot about
it's
that.
not a no-brainer, I think we
Yeah.
You're right,
combine
yeah,
them.
we don't have.
Oh,
So we have a meeting, another actual meeting,
On the
2 weeks from now.
21st,
The
yeah.
21st.
Nothing on this agenda?
Well, I was waiting until after this one. There's no site plan reviews, it would just be your, reviewing the minutes.
Yeah.
So yeah, we could just
I
carry
say
this
we work
discussion
on
into the
Yeah,
next meeting.
sovereignty on the
So-
21st.
Let's do that, yeah.
Yep, 21st,
Talk about food
7 PM here,
Yeah.
meeting.
can we
This
get
month?
This month,
copies of that?
This one.
Lindsay, can we get copies of that?
Yeah, I emailed it to everyone, I'll print them off for the
Send
next
out,
meeting.
yeah, or just send the email out, and
That's
if
Jan-
I
you got a
sent it out,
PDF or
I'm
something.
not gonna keep sending it out over and over again, if
Okay.
you guys got it.
Okay, so we know what we're doing there. Last thing on the list here is definition of density.
Well, that, we can't really do anything about definition of density without a warrant article.
Right. Well, I would say, I think where this stems from is from what we saw with Watson Woods, the idea of large development. And as far as redefining density, it'd be kind of difficult, right? I mean, the density is what it is, where 2 acres was a rural, but I think from that, maybe if we address it in terms of a major development, maybe tweak
Yeah,
what,
we have to be able to tweak the difference between a minor and a major, and that
I think
would
so.
actually mean how many houses,
right,
or how many lots.
as opposed to trying to change what the acreage is that somebody has to buy, if we just address this in form
Yeah.
of major development.
Major and minor.
Because density is all dependent on your location,
Yeah.
like,
And how you wanna measure it,
Yeah, it's
if the measurement tool is gonna be based on frontage, that's great, but, one of the single biggest things that impacts your land use is not having contiguous land. So you can take that frontage density and split it up over a whole bunch of what was open land, and now you don't have density, but Right.
We're actually
Right,
dealing with this
right,
issue right now in our comprehensive
Yeah,
plan.
that's a huge
And
thing.
we're working with,
I'm right
Southern
on the
Maine.
water.
You know, I think you guys take it and you like break it down to the point where it becomes meaningless.
Mm.
You know, why don't you look at what the reality of it is? It's not the nitpicking and the mechanics. What is it you want to protect? How do you want to protect it, and go from there? Instead of, because when I see it, you keep coming around in a circle, everybody has a different view on how to do it, how it's measured, you know. And then we get people with real extreme emotional reactions to it, like we saw with the Watson Woods thing. But I think that, you know, we gotta look at what do we have in this town that we're sort of stewards for? And, you know, how are we gonna protect that? And I don't think that, you know, going round and round over it's this, it's that, you know, I think it's more about trying to get a grasp on what people want. You want to have some open space left, you know?
We also have to take into consideration where a subdivision is going in, like Watson Woods is going in a bad spot for a number of reasons. It's right next to a conservation area in Lebanon. It's right next to it.
Like 47 towns.
The whole town.
That's the metric we use.
It's also, it really doesn't meet site distance on both ends.
I mean, that's,
that's,
they said it did, you know, it does. Right, if they said it did, I mean, when you know, the guys, again, so look, I see what you're saying, but the only way, what concerned everybody was the major development, and in fact, the major development, it conformed to the ordinances, but it still feels too dense. I think that's what everybody's saying, all right? So the only way I see to address it is to say a major development maybe should be 3 acres per lot, or so. I mean, that's just a number, I don't know. I don't wanna say, right now, Joe any man can come out to a rural parcel field, buy 2 acres and build a house. We don't wanna stop that. We don't wanna say guys come out and buy 5 acres and build a house. But I get it, major development might be a little different. Other than that, I don't know how else to address it, me personally.
Yeah, I remember them talking about
I don't know, density is different if you're in a village area. Village, rural, that's where we have to make some delineation.
Depending on who you
We
are.
have to make
It
delineation.
doesn't, you know, there are delineations, that's the thing.
Well,
It's
village rural
delineated
does-
by the zones, I mean.
I don't think village
you know,
rural,
Rural
that. How
residential.
much land you got?
or rural residential is 13 houses on a strip.
But
that's what it is.
Yeah, what it is
That's the
it's
fact.
2 acres per house is what it is. That's the way it
If you
goes.
wanna change that, you gotta address it, you gotta address it in a way that, but, you know, takes into account everybody's interests. Not just our desire to have some open land, but the desire of people who have big tracts of land that they can't pay the taxes on. They gotta turn it over to get some taxes back. I mean, it's a can of worms, but I don't think it's something, I think it's kinda central. So the only thing we got to sell here is, you know, the aesthetics of the area.
So what do you think, the way to address that then? Do you think that, you know, I'm wrong there when I say the way to address it is through with the major developments? We maybe tweak that a bit and say, well, if you're gonna have a major development, this is the way it has to be. Maybe a little bit more acreage on each lot. Not the way, I mean, that's just an idea. I don't really have any other ideas on that.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I mean, I think if you define first what you want, you can get a better idea of how you're gonna get it.
Could you have a definition of what's major and minor per zone?
Right, I think right now the definition is 4 houses,
Right.
that's like the line right
Across-
there,
yeah,
yeah,
across
so
all
whether
zones.
it's in wherever, you know, that's the way it's defined now,
So minor is 4 and anything over.
is major.
Right.
Yeah.
And I still think that's a good one to stick with.
Sure, I do too.
Okay, so then you can have 2 minor developments back to back,
Yeah, right next to.
you know,
Yeah.
and have 8 houses in a row.
Sure, you're right.
See what I'm
yeah.
saying? I mean, it's like, you gotta really think it out. You can't just come up.
Well, that's where we put in conservation land in
That's
that.
things that's why I don't think we really.
Which is the-
You really can't, you really.
Well, if they want, yeah, we can have.
You can
certain
overthink
locations.
it, that's the
Build
only problem.
conservation.
We're not communist, yeah.
There's a room,
You have to have
that's
about
Would you find
5.
that
downside to all of
everything?
it.
I can't hear anything.
What is, how is minor defined?
4 or less,
4 or less
correct,
houses?
yes, or subdivisions, 4 subdivisions or less.
And no amount of acres?
It depends on the zone. The acreage is determined by the zone that it's in. So rural is 2 acres per lot.
Determined by how you get your water. So if it's supplied, if your water supplied by a
I
well,
think I live in a
it's
country
two
rural
acres or
area.
over. If it's supplied by the town, it's an acre. That's your
Really?
maximum, or your minimum lot size.
Right.
So it's more or less like.
Well, I think in certain zones, like farm and forest, I think it's 3 is the minimum for them, so.
Yeah, and so there might be stipulations on specific zones, but in general, the minimum lots are.
Oh, yeah, we have to take into
water.
consideration the zone, we have to take into soil conditions,
Okay.
all of that.
Okay, so, where are we at there? We've got a plan for the next meeting. We're gonna have,
We have a public hearing set.
public hearing on the 4th. We have the next meeting is the 21st. We'll be, going over what?
Miss Already?
Mr. Nelly?
I just, if you're done with your other stuff, I just had a question about the process of, if the application's denied, what is the process like? How many days do you have to appeal?
For Mr. LaValle?
No, for Mr. Moreau, he can appeal that. right?
He appeals that to the Board of Appeals, so that really would be out of our hands. At this point, it is out of the hands of the planning board. It moves on to the Board of Appeals.
I'm just wondering the days.
How many days? I would think at least 30 days, I think.
30 or 45?
I'm not sure
It is
exactly.
in the ordinance or
Don't
the
know.
appeals section.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty standard, something like 30 days. Mr. Moreau should know that though, if he doesn't file the appeal within the right time period.
And I think maybe the appeals board can waive something like that if there's good cause, you know, but yeah, generally it's like 30 days.
Like 30 to 40 days.
Yeah, I think it should be in the ordinance, but to me, it didn't look like he was gonna appeal, but who knows?
Thank you.
One more thing. I don't know if you want to do it or not, but we mentioned, we talked a couple times about attendance and Mr. Clifford.
Yeah, I think at the next meeting was when we were gonna address attendance. We have to talk about the alternate position too, the other alternate position and it being filled. I think there's some interest in that, but that will be at the next meeting. Since we don't have much going on then anyway. Okay, so I think that's it. Is there anything else from anybody? No, I think that's it. We went over everything. All right, so, make a motion to, make a motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor? All right.